Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, people. Ahlan wa sahlan bikum wa marhaban. Juan Ying Layth, bienvenidos a todos, people. Khush Amadid. And as always, swagatam, swagatam. So, let me just check. First of all, I just want to check that people can hear me, that that we are live. I'm just going to share this from the Facebook page. If there's any audio issues, if there's any echoing, you can tell me now. I can just fix it before we start. I'm just going to share this. It's just going to take me 10 seconds to do so. Alright, there it is, people. There it is. Alright. People are saying you're gonna burn yourself out. Nah, yaar. No rest for the wicked. And folks, there you go. I'm just gonna post that. And we is good. Audio is good. Somebody saying that's fine. That's awesome. Right, people, with all this mayhem and chaos, and since we're in quarantena, alright, in la quarantena, we're here anyway, why not make use of our time? Who better to speak to when we want to know what the reality is on the ground? What is this COVID? Yaar, ye sala COVID kar kya raha hai? Who can we speak to better than our esteemed guest tonight? Right here is a picture. You can see it in front of you, people. That is the one and only Dr. Majid Sheikh, people, from the West Midlands, UK, bringing him in right here. Assalamu alaikum, Doc. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I'm trying to, since we're in the time of no social contact and social distancing, I'm trying to bring the Hyderabadi salam back to fashion as our way of greeting each other.
And those that don't know that our doc here, Dr. Majid, is a Dakkani, alright, from Dakkan, Hyderabad, people, where three things are definitely so popular and famous for: the language, the biryani, and besides any other places, Dr. Majid himself is the third.
MashaAllah.
So, as in the words of Zouk, those of you that don't know, Dakkan ki badi tarikh hai yaar, badi history hai Dakkan ki. Dakkan, as Zouk said, agar garche mulke Dakkan mein sunte hain kadre sukhan, that even though we hear that Urdu has a huge value in Dakkan, in Hyderabad, which you can look it up on the map. पर कौन जाता है ज़ोक दिल्ली की गलियां छोड़कर? Allah, Allah, Allah. But
see, this is where I would disagree, and I would say that Hyderabad की गलियों में एक अजीब दिलचस्पी है.
एक
अजीब दिलचस्पी है जो खामोखा चलती रहती है, जाती रहती है. उर्दू ही एक जबान है जो हैदराबाद को हैदराबाद बनाती है.
यार, इससे याद आया, what is this about wanting to rename Hyderabad, what the Indian government was suggesting?
The Indian government, since the rightward shift of Indian politics in the 1980s and 1990s to now, what we have is basically the equivalent of the Hindu Jamaat-e-Islami in power. To put it in a Muslim kind of context, we have a very theocratic Hindu nationalist government that's in power, and their version of history is that they have not been independent for 1,000 years, that they were under the colonial rule of the British, and before that they were under the colonial rule of various invader Muslim dynasties, whether that would be the Mughals, the
Lodis, the Tughlaqs,
Lodis, whatever,
Khiljis, and
Yes, exactly.
But they
And
had
so
their own dynasties as well.
yeah,
South
yeah.
India, the
Yes,
whole.
yes, they did. But the point being that the Muslims were who of whatever type, whether they were Turk, Afghan, Persian, Arab, whatever they were, they were invaders from outside, and they were doing hukumat on India, and they gave us these names. So why do we not go and take those original names back? That is the narrative. The problem with the narrative is, of course, that it's completely false. There was no settlement at where what is now called Hyderabad, before the ruler Nizam al-Mulk made the capital, or made that a fort there, the Golconda fort and the cantonment there. So um, it's a kind of it's a straw man argument. They're trying to prove, they're trying to say something when the reality on the ground is something different. You know, uh,
Sorry,
it's
stop just for a moment, Doc. There's nothing. Is there something rattling or anything close to the mic? I'm hearing something moving around, like some paper or something. Or is it the mic scraping on the jacket as it's moving?
I think it might be the mic scraping on the jacket. Hold on.
No, it is. I think it's your muscles कुछ ज़्यादा हिल रहे हैं ना. आप जब जोश में आ रहे हैं तो.
सही बात है. Or is the audio better now?
The audio is better right now.
Yeah, okay.
आप जरा शांत हो गए तो साथ साथ वो भी शांत हो गए.
अच्छा. So
But it's true. It's so shocking to see. I mean, I just brought this. Just came straight to my mind because obviously you're very acquainted with. For those who don't know, हमारे भारतीय doctor, obviously Hyderabad, not the Pakistani Hyderabad. Deccan is in the Indian Hyderabad. So you're very acquainted with the kind of geopolitics there as well as being a man of many talents, as well as being a consultant doctor as well. But I thought since that just came up, it is a sad state of affairs. A lot of what is happening. I know there was the whole, with the CAA thing, and then there was or the cab, if you want to call it cab, and the whole counter backlash, the Shaheen Bagh thing. But now with coronavirus, has that all settled in India? Is it people? What's the status quo?
see, the government and Narendra Modi, the kind of the strong right-wing strongman who is the PM there at the moment, he is very much fond of the grand gesture, right? Where the implementation of it, he's not that interested in, but the grand gesture, the bold move. So his bold move has been to basically put the entire country on quarantine, on lockdown, a lockdown more severe than what we're seeing here, a lockdown more similar to what the Chinese had, what the Italians have, a proper curfew. If you're out and it's enforced, there's police out with their lathis and whatever. And in this situation, I think जब जान की पड़वा रहती ना, ये these things go into the background. These are kind of times of, you could almost call it national unity, but unity because of out of necessity. You need to. I mean, if you look at the British example here as well, where does anybody talk about Brexit now? Is anybody wondering about the Labour leadership election? Anything like that? No, because there are far bigger things at play, and there are far bigger things to be concentrating on. So similarly in India as well, I think that a lot of the stuff that was going on with the NRC, with the NPR, Citizenship Amendment Act, protests, XYZ, I think a lot of that has been it's all had to stop, whether you're pro or anti, because the necessity of the hour at the moment is, to try and stop the spread of this, very infectious virus. And, with the kind of hygiene standards and the kind of dense population in India, it could really be a complete disaster, you know. If we were to see, a major outbreak there. And as you know, and as I'm sure most of the people on here know, there's a lag time from initial cases to full exposure.
Yeah.
You know, and so in one sense, you could say that because he is in the position, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in the position of being this kind of strong man, right-wing populist,
Exactly.
with that larger majority on his back, he can put in these more draconian measures
Yeah.
in. Um, I just feel bad for the large proportion of labor and non-skilled workers in India who literally are daily laborers. You work the day, you get 100, 200 rupees, you have your dinner in the evening, you know, and what's going to happen to those? So, बिचारे हमेशा गरीब ही, they are the ones who always suffer in these situations. Um, I think we'll know the results of whether it's worked or not in a couple of weeks' time.
True.
Uh,
Absolutely. I mean, it's something. It's amazing because it's only a matter of weeks, really. If we backtrack, it was almost just a fantasy. This what the world is now seeing, and um, I mean, it's a when you just think about it, that in and of itself questions the nature of reality with a capital R. Like if you
I
think
mean,
about it, yeah.
there was an interesting article on the BBC News website which said the month that changed everything. That on the 28th of February,
What, not
what
twenty
we were,
ninth, the leap year.
yeah, no, what were we thinking? We were thinking about Brexit. We were thinking about the new budget. We were thinking about the new Labour leadership election. We were thinking about what's Trump doing with China and all this kind of stuff. And now here we are, 4 weeks later, in basically virtual quarantine,
Hmm.
only being allowed out of your houses for an hour a day or for bare essentials.
Yeah.
And it does make you think. And and in the article I had a very good point where it says that history may well be divided in the future into BC and AC, before Corona and after Corona.
Oof,
And
that sounds very kind of apocalyptic, Doc.
well, I mean,
Sounds
if
quite
you think
scary almost. डरा
uh,
रहे हैं आप सबको.
ये नहीं, डराने की बात नहीं है, लेकिन
Boo!
अ, लेकिन okay, I mean, I should put a disclaimer first before I say anything further.
Of course, of
That
course.
everything that I say are my own views. They do not represent that of any government, any hospital, any
Yeah.
hospital
Just,
trusts, anything of any sort. I,
just,
I am a doctor. I work in the NHS. I know exactly what the challenges are and the difficulties are, and I also know the sterling work that the NHS staff have been doing. I know for a fact that many people were brought to tears by the spontaneous applause that was done
yeah.
a couple of days ago.
And
Um, and we must thank Allah, actually. We must thank Allah
subhanallah,
that we live in a country which has a national health system,
subhanallah.
which has these things in it. Um, you know, whenever I'm talking about this, I'm talking about my own personal opinions. The government advice is out there online,
Yeah.
and been disseminated. There's been a lot of commentary about whether what was done before was correct, whether it was done, could the situation have been managed better.
Yeah.
There's discussions about where the coronavirus
And
came from, and China,
just to
you know,
reiterate to our just to be clear with our viewers that this obviously Dr. Majid, these are his personal opinions. They're not
yeah,
representative of where he's working, where he may have been working, no kind of institution. So just as a very clear and transparent disclaimer.
yeah,
And also, I want to just quickly put in there, Dr. Majid is one of the unsung heroes of this country that are currently on the front line. So, Dr. Majid, first of all, I just want to express my gratitude to you, Yar. You're saving lives, Yar. Much love, Geo Meri Jaan,
Yeah,
Geo. Mwah.
Jazakallah Jazakallah khair, and our reward is sought only from Allah. As I think the quote comes from Imam Shafi'i, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that he knew of no other science that was better to learn apart from the sciences of religion than the sciences of medicine.
Yeah,
I
like
think
they
it was
say,
that.
ilmul adyan or ilmul abdan.
Yeah.
The knowledge of adyan, of deens, or the knowledge of medical knowledge,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, and you know, I have an appreciation for that more since I've become a doctor than before. Obviously, you know, like a lot of young Asian men, I was kind of pushed towards, you know, certain careers as we
मेरा
often.
बेटा डॉक्टर बनेगा.
Yeah. Well,
Assalamu
oh,
alaikum,
assalamu
somebody.
alaikum. See,
See, Layla's.
my daughter also always has to say salam whenever I'm doing a podcast.
Allah, Allah, Allah.
So
Alaikum salam. Layla's still awake as well, watching her iPad. But.
क्या बोलना है मेरी माँ?
See,
हाँ
In your room,
हाँ
it has to change into one.
हाँ मैं कर okay ठीक है. She's telling me that because the clocks are going forward.
Allah, they have to advise you. See that
Yeah.
that's it. That's, you see, I have to call my younger one Zara. I call her Dadi. Meri Dadi. Ab batao, abuelita.
Yeah.
Ha, meri Dadi.
Exactly.
You know, I saw this
So-
meme which said that they've got this picture of this man, and he says, a woman who could tell me what to do isn't even born. And then it says 4 years later, and he's there with this little girl, his daughter, and he's like all dressed up as she's kind of saying,
It is amazing, isn't it? The power that daughters have
Oh my
over
God.
their fathers.
It's so
In
amazing.
a way,
They've got
in
me
a
wrapped
way,
around their fingers, you know, honestly. And I never
Oh.
thought I would.
I
I never
mean, you know,
thought.
I mean, I've got two boys, mashallah, and then I've got my daughter, and you know, there is a qualitative difference. You know, if the boys come up to me starting, you know, making demands, it's kind of like, oh, you know, shut up and I'll show you the back of my hand, lad. You know, but
It's like, yeah. What is it? Father को बेटा नहीं बाप कहते हैं.
Note, we are not condoning domestic
No,
violence in any way. So
brother.
not be involved. Yeah.
Symbolism, yaar. Symbolism. सीखो जाइलो.
So,
Metaphors.
but no. So I mean, getting back to what I was trying to say was that I do genuinely believe that this country is going to when we emerge, inshallah, from this crisis, we will be a fundamentally different nation. And I'll give the example.
I thought you were going to add still about your daughter having you wrapped around her finger.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, since then anyway. Definitely.
वो तो पक्की बात है. That's a done deal.
What the malum hi hai wo. Yeah, no, I mean what I mean is about, you know, going back to the topic that we were saying
more
about
tragedy.
coronavirus.
Yeah.
You know, like for example, when you look at the measures that the Chancellor, you know, who's a Yorkshire lad, I'd like to point out.
Is he a Yorkshire lad? Is he? Okay.
Yes, where I worked for many years. The measures that he's put out are very similar to a universal basic income. Something that, you know.
What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is, so there is a policy amongst left-wing circles, amongst the more hard left, the more, you know, the Corbynites, if you would like, you know, if you want.
Corbynista.
Which basically said that the best way to produce equality and of opportunity in society is to give everybody an income. You don't give them benefits. You give them an income. You give them.
Then how would they don't work? You mean you just give them money?
Yeah, and then on top of that, if they work, they work. If they don't work, they don't work.
Acha.
Yeah. And so you know, you can sit on your backside and have.
The hukumat's
And
not meri bulbul.
Yeah. And And pretty much that was the response by most other, politicians, including on the left, but obviously by the Tories. What kind of magical money tree are you talking about? We can't just make print money and just give it. People sitting around doing nothing, blah blah blah. But actually, look what's happened in these last last 2 weeks. The government has offered to pay self-employed people what they would be earning up to 2.5 grand because of the fact that they can't work because of coronavirus. They are paying staff up to 80% of their wages as grants. Yeah. So which is about what, about 2 grand again? All right. So
But I want
in
to ask: are they? I mean, I've heard messages from people, and I've kind of seen things online. I've heard the announcement made by what's his full name, Rishi.
Sunak. Rishi Sunak.
Right. Okay, Sunak. So now I've heard that and I've seen that, but I've not seen clear guidelines for how people can actually do that. Like they haven't actually, as far as I'm aware, they have made the announcement, but is it actually real? As in, is it
Okay.
happening?
So,
I've heard that not
so
really.
I think that's a very fair point. What you have to understand is that a policy like this would normally take 6 months, 8 months to be formulated and fleshed out and be released to the public. Okay, and even then, there's no guarantee that it would work out very well. A very good example of this is universal credit. Universal credit has been was beset with problems.
Oh,
Even though it's
absolutely.
not credit. So therefore, now they're having to do all of these things in such a condensed time frame. We're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 days. I think a lot of the promises, just because of the logistics of working it out, when you have a reduced workforce, when more than half the country is locked down, I think the logistics are going to be that people are going
Would
to
it
be
not
waiting
be
2 to 3
easier?
months.
Would it not be easier for the state to simply cut a deal with all banks who have mortgages and loans, and to say for the next 2 months, definitely, potentially 3 months, no mortgage payments are to be collected. They can be collected from the state. Now, you see, because the banks are only a few you have to ultimately deal with. There's huge numbers of payouts, but a few banks in essence. Now, and landlords can also make a claim. As opposed like that, and if they did the same for bills, like main bill, essential bills like gas, electric, I'm not saying, satellites and whatever, but gas, electric, things like that. Fundamentally, most people's living costs, because they're just staying at home anyway, have drastically been reduced. Like they've now just got to worry about essential food. Now, you see, I would have thought that would be much more easier to do as opposed to say to the public, all right, people, claim money from us, where you've got a population of, almost 60 million. How, like, I just don't see this being able to, like, I don't see reality to it. That's all. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, what I'd say is that I think the banks have already, uh, the banks understand that they need to keep their customers, and it is not in their interest for there to be problems between them and their customers. The people that
But
they're
I'm
lending
being
to.
honest with you. Many
So
banks have said no. Like I know people who've like on chat groups who've said, "I've contacted my bank for a mortgage, holiday, whatever," and they've said no.
yeah.
And
Well, that's surprising
what do these people
because
do
that's
then?
not been my experience. My experience has been that the majority of the banks that I have come across or my friends have come across have been very much of the, yes, we are willing to, help out and etc. So
But wouldn't it be easier for them to just bill the state as opposed to the state? Because if you took down living costs of all adults within the UK, you removed living costs for 3 months, right? Now, and essential bills like gas and electric, that you would have already alleviated the burden, and I think you could actually do it as well quite swiftly because the banks just deal with the government and they just get it done. as opposed to the public. I don't know, this is just a thought. यार मुझे ये ideas आते रहते हैं यार. Why don't I make my cabinet?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the old Indian film Giriftar
I
with
have, Amitabh Bachchan.
Amitabh Bachchan and Kamal Hassan?
Kamal Hassan, yes.
And I think Rajnikant was in it as well.
Rajnikant is in it as well, yes.
Yeah.
And he has like, one of them's a Muslim, I think
Yeah. The Rajnikant
is
is
a
a
Muslim.
Muslim, and the villain is Khader Khan.
Kadir Khan, yes, and he has that skull.
And the idea ki khopdi.
Khopri, yes, that's it, yeah.
ये मेरे आइडिया की खोपड़ी में से है ख्यालात गुनगुनाते
I watched those movies growing up as a kid. I must have, honestly, I grew up like probably 8, 9 at that age. I used to watch these movies every day. My dad used to play them, so I used to watch them every day. But yeah, we actually had that one at home, Giriftar.
It was one of my favorite ones. But maybe you should get that kind of skeletal model and have your own idea ki khopdi, from which these ideas come out from. No, going back to your point, look, I mean, everybody's making it up as they go along, man. Let's be honest. Everybody's making it up as they go along. This is unprecedented.
Everybody's winging it.
Yeah, everybody's winging it. Because nobody has, this situation has never, there's words that are used in the media which sensationalize situations, unprecedented, unbelievable, this, that, and the other. This really is something without precedent. There is nothing,
One thing for sure, we'll be prepared for the next global pandemic.
Well, inshallah we don't have one, and may Allah save us from one of them.
Yeah, some of these Chinese Ya'juj Ma'juj. Yeah, some people in the past used to believe China was Ya'juj and Ma'juj. यार ये बंदे के पुत्र नहीं बन सकते हैं क्या? Can they stop eating bats?
Yeah, I mean, there used to be the thing, wasn't it? They thought that I have some sympathy for the people of
bats.
the 12th century, of the 12th or 13th century, who thought that the Mongols were the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Because imagine you're sat there in Baghdad, in your nice little silky place with your harem and this, that. And here comes the people that you've never heard of, you've never seen, with a language that who look strange, and they just devastate everything on their path.
And they just eat anything. They like totally apply Maliki fiqh, even the part that no Malikis apply. Imam Malik's probably thinking, yaar, ye to maine aise hi keh diya. I just said everything's halal to eat. I didn't mean go and eat it.
I just said you could do it. Doesn't mean you should do it.
Just because I said bats ain't haram, these guys start frying them.
Yeah. But so I mean, we are really in unprecedented times, and so we can all be armchair
critics,
or not only
philosophers,
armchair thinkers.
Hame dekh lo.
Yeah, and healthy debate is good. I mean, it's good that we're in a society where we have platforms such as YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, where the Joe Blogs can get his views known in a way that wouldn't have occurred even.
Somebody's asked that. Am I looking at comments? I am reading the comments, guys. If any decent questions, we will bring them in. Keep them coming. I am seeing them. Cool. There's much love to you as well, Doc, but do carry on in the comments.
Yeah. So I think it's we are a much more literate culture than we were even say 15 years ago.
Here's on a side tangential note, Doc. I don't want to drift away too much. But do you think, I was contemplating this because I was thinking about it. I heard it in some kind of by some authors and stuff. And do you think we in this day and age, people by and large have a more developed sense of consciousness than people before, just because of maybe the way children, whilst the neuroplasticity is still kind of growing, that they're being kind of developed much more, as opposed to children in the past, just they weren't really being taught so much ideas and things like this, and now that they are, do you think there's a much more heightened consciousness collectively as a species by and large, because some people set the Anthropocene, like the final scene of, within anthropology of humans, just from the industrial age to now, even though we've got the human species. I mean, I don't know, I just thought.
I would maybe collectively I can see your point, but I think that's not true on a personal level. I
Sure, like
think
Plato was a deep thinker, Aristotle was a deep thinker.
yeah. I think if you look at children now, they are very much they lack imagination.
You
They,
think
la-
so?
I think so because they are in a state of constant stimulation, and don't say a dodgy joke here now because I know you will, right? But because
So
but
I'll
because
refrain since it's children we're talking about.
yeah.
So,
But whether it's with iPads or phones or TVs, they're so used to doing something that when even the simplest thing disappears, it's like they have no idea what to do.
but don't you
And
find? Don't,
I'll
yeah.
give I'll give just a personal example of when I was moving house,
Mm-hmm.
and our Wi-Fi connection hadn't got sorted,
Yeah.
and as we were doing, and my children were like, we're bored, we've got no idea what to do, and it's like there's millions of things you can do. You can go out and play in the garden. We've got cricket bats. We've got what you call there's books to read. There's a football. There's this that. But and it's like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. They're so bombarded now with stuff that stimulates them cognitively,
Yeah.
that when that stimulus is lost, they don't have the imagination to do things. When I was a lad, when we were
Alright.
when we were young, if you got bored, you found something to do.
But then, you say that, and I find their creativity, their expression, much more heightened than when we were kids. I think the confidence that young children have today, I definitely don't remember any children from my age when we were kids being that kind of confident to express themselves, to have kind of like thoughts. Like I hear sometimes Layla's now. I'm gonna get in trouble now. I see ages and years. Now she's now 8, and the thing is that despite this, I mean, which when I was 8, I think I must have been like barely a mute, but the ideas and creativity and words and vocab, and it surprises me. Like I don't know. Like I think this is why when I was hearing this thought that maybe people are of a heightened consciousness, as opposed to, like, if you went back 500 years, do you think children or people thought as deeply as they do today? But I agree with you. I think maybe on a collective level, but not necessarily individually, because there are still.
I mean, the other example I would give is I don't know if you ever visited Pakistan when you were young. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old. I don't know if you ever
Yeah,
visited.
yeah, I did.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I remember visiting India when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, and apparently it was obvious to everybody that I was the kid from foreign.
Yeah,
I was the
we
foreigner.
call them. We call them over there, Valaiti. I
Yeah,
don't know if
yeah,
you guys, do you have this Valaiti?
yes, but to a lesser extent
What
because
what do
that's
they
what.
term? Do they
No,
say
no,
Valaiti as well?
Yeah. Bahir
Okay,
wale, bahir wale.
okay, Bahar wale.
Yeah, and and the reason was because
That, by the
you
way,
got
for people watching, Vilayati more so in Mirpur sides, Azad Kashmir, they tend to say Vilayati.
yeah. The thing is that and one of the ways that they could tell was the fact that the local Indian kids were just so much sharper. Do you know what I mean? Then
Chalak, you mean by sharp Chalak?
yeah, chalu, chalak, shrewd.
Yeah,
They'd have a jatpat answer straight after you.
yeah.
Like that you'd get some biryani and they'd say, "Oh, ये कितनी अच्छी biryani है, खुद बनाए क्या बाहर से लेकर आए?" And you'll be like, a 5 saal ka bacha, 5-year-old kid is saying this.
That is true. I remember my uncle's daughter. She used to be. She was probably just like 3 at the time, and this lady used to come to our house, and she used to say, "अच्छा फिर आ गई है, यहाँ खाने के लिए आ गई होगी, घर पे कोई खाना ही नहीं होगा इसका." And she used to think that, oh, maybe the people at home teach her to say this stuff. Otherwise, how could she say it? But genuinely, she used to just come up with it. Nobody.
Yeah, and whilst us as the Bahar wale bache, we were always the ones that were quiet and this because we didn't.
You got a solid point. There is a different level of intelligence, I guess.
Yeah. So
that kind of world-wise.
So I think that if you're using your analogy of 500 years ago, and saying that well, are we at a higher, more evolved level of consciousness? Well, and no, I don't think we are. Maybe in certain collective matters we are, but then I mean, even then, you look at some of the philosophical points that Aristotle and Socrates were talking about, thousands of years ago.
Immensely deep, obviously, yeah. So I agree on the particular level, on the personal, individual level, definitely. But it's amazing that people are in quarantine now as a moment of reflection. And kind of locked up. But people in the past, like if we looked at 500 years ago, one thing they generally, I'm assuming, wouldn't have had is the kind of ambitions and aspirations that young people or children grow up with. Like, when I grow up, I want to be. This notion, because people were just where they were. Like, you're a farmer, your dad was a farmer, his dad was a farmer, his dad was a farmer. This, it's not like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be something else. I mean, maybe the odd person thought that, but I don't think collectively ambition existed. And
I think you can make that point as a fair point for the latter half of the 20th century. I think that it has plateaued since.
Yeah.
I would say that I don't see any massive. I know exactly what you mean. When in the 80s, 70s, you'd have kids saying, "I want to be an astronaut. I want to be on the moon. I want to be on telly or whatever." And yes, maybe 60, 70 years earlier, they wouldn't have said something like that. But now 40 years after that, now we're into the middle of getting into the the first quarter of the 21st century, I don't think there's much of a qualitative difference. If anything, I would say that the amount of creature comforts that people have nowadays actually deadens your aspirations.
Like, do you mean the breadth of choice? It paralyzes. Is this what?
No. What I mean is that you have so many creature comforts that the concept of necessarily becoming something greater, is less of an ambition.
Too comfortable.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give the example of my father, my late father, rahimahullah. He became a doctor in the 70s in India and moved over to this country. Now, he had ambition from the start. My grandfather was just a civil servant in the Indian civil service. My father had the drive of becoming, not just becoming kamyab, as they'd say, not just becoming successful, but becoming khabil. Becoming,
the Hyderabadi accent, people.
Yeah.
The qaf as a kha.
Yeah. But making something of yourself, making, improving yourself as a person. And so, he went for medicine, even though he came from humble background, even though he had to cycle to whatever, and they didn't have electricity and blah, blah, blah. And, that was a generation that had that ambition, of they could see themselves not living in a 2-roomed house in Hyderabad with 15 other relatives, but I'm going to go off and I'm going to go Layth, I'm going to go Bahar, I'm going to, be a doctor, I'm being this. Now, if you have seen hardship like that, then, you strive longer and harder for the better. right?
True,
If,
true.
if on the other hand you've had as you know, my mother would say, "Khate pite log," you know,
God damn.
people, people who are, who are comfortable, they've never had to worry about a meal in their life. They've never had to worry about the electricity going. They've never had to worry about getting the water, this, that, and the other.
So true.
Then their aspirations are also, well,
Mm.
life's good enough as it is. Why do I need
Yeah.
anything more? Um,
Like
th-
necessity is the mother of invention. Like you have to. Sometimes you struggle is essential for development. So
yes, exactly, exactly. And if you don't have a struggle, then you won't develop, number one. And number two, if you do, if you don't have a struggle, you will invent one.
yeah, no, it's true. Like
And
token. Mm.
I mean, this is something that I have listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sure you know
legend,
that.
absolute
uh,
legend.
You know,
Yeah,
he's also living proof of how hidayah only comes from Allah, because philosophically he has proved, as far as I can see from his lectures and stuff like that, philosophically and rationally, he's proved the existence of one God, and he's proved this, what we would call the Islamic narrative of doing good works and good deeds, and they will have a good effect on you and society, whatever. And yet he is at the least ambivalent towards Islam. At worst, he has an open hostility. Khair, moving that to
yeah.
the
Do,
to
do,
the
do you
to
sense
the
that? I didn't actually sense that from him, but
No, I
I'm
mean,
quite.
when he has been asked directly, when he's been asked directly, what do you think about Islam? And he says, I don't know what to make of Islam because I can't figure out whether it's a religion or a political system.
Hmm.
Uh, um, and and in Islam, I cannot see what he believes is the founding principle of the Judeo-Christian model, which I also think is actually works in the Islamic model, which is the sovereignty of the person upon himself. That you are a sovereign agent and you will be judged according to what you do and what you don't do. You're judged according to your actions. I mean, that's a very Islamic way of thinking if you
Yeah,
if you
of
think
course, of
about it.
course, of course.
Anyway, but just going back to what we were saying, he talks a lot about how the mind has either, you can call it either evolved, designed, whatever your beliefs are about, that process, to deal with struggle.
So we'll
Now,
come to. Sorry, Doc, just to interrupt. Some people are asking questions. We'll come to your questions about cousin marriages and things like that. Let once later on as we kind of conclude on these. But carry on, Doc. I just
yeah,
want to
yeah,
acknowledge because somebody kept repeating the question
yeah, sure,
so
sure, sure,
much. Yeah.
sure. Unfortunately, I can't see the question, so
Yeah, yeah, not a problem. But I mean, we will be dealing with that. But yeah,
yeah,
carry on,
yeah,
Doc.
yeah.
Yes.
And so what happens is that because mankind is so used to struggles, and he's designed to deal with struggle, yeah, and stress, that when there isn't stress, he invents it in his own mind.
Okay.
Okay. So, for example, we talk about the mental health crisis that's
Yeah.
occurring, in the last 30, 40 years, where so many people are now, on
Classically,
antidepressants.
clinically depressed.
Yeah, are clinically depressed, on antidepressants, this, that, and the other. And this wasn't the case before. And you think to yourself, well, why wasn't it the case before? Well, because before people had real necessities and things that they had to struggle with. Um, as an example, another example, my my khala, my mother's oldest sister, unfortunately died over the weekend.
Oh,
Yeah,
inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi
Lillahi
raji'un. May
raji'un.
Allah
May
grant
Allah
her
give her
high maqam in
Jannah.
Jannatul Firdaus.
Amin, amin,
Was
amin.
it
Uh,
related to the COVID thing?
no, it was not.
Okay.
She was a patient who she had heart problems, and unfortunately, she had a heart attack, and she passed away. Now, the reason I mention her is she's, one of the older sister of my mother. My mother is in her 70s, so she was in her 80s. Okay,
Okay.
she was of a generation where every woman lost a child. My
Subhanallah.
mother, my mother tells me, told me of how her sisters oh, this sister, she had beautiful twins, but they died. One died at, 2 months after being born. Another one died the year after being born. And then another sister, she also had two kids that died. My own grandmother, apparently, my father wasn't the eldest child. The eldest child was one that died at the age of 2 or 3. Infant mortality was massive in those
Subhanallah.
days. And the people had to deal with that. Can you imagine now, right? Having to deal with the loss of a child. It
Subhanallah.
would,
It's inconceivable. I
yeah,
mean,
it's inconceivable. And yet they were a generation in which nearly every woman of that generation, of that household, had lost at least one child, at least one child.
subhanallah.
So Allah has designed us to deal with these kinds of stresses, and they did. She lived to the age of 80. She, she brought up her children, got her daughters married off. Mashallah,
They were
but
a,
they were
a kind
successful.
of a warrior class of people,
Yeah,
subhanallah.
and now we don't have those existential threats to us and to our families and to our children. So our brains find something, and therefore we get stressed about work. We get stressed about deadlines. We get
Yeah.
stressed about not finding the right partner. You know, you know, things which I'm not trying to belittle any of these in any way, shape, or form.
No,
I
no,
am
no,
a
of course,
doctor.
of course, of
I am a
course.
doctor. I know how severe clinical depression can be, and I know it is a real problem. But it is a problem that is caused by modern life, modern
No, it's true,
society,
true, true. Absolutely.
modern.
In the, what is it? Ghame ishq karna hota, ghame rozgar hota. It's like
Yeah,
the mind will just find a problem to preoccupy itself with.
yeah,
Subhanallah, yeah.
yeah. So I
I mean,
mean,
do you feel in some ways, look, calamities, some people are saying the way these things happen, there is a cycle. And this nature has kind of gone in that sense almost full circle, or it's done a cycle. And what we're seeing now in terms of COVID-19 is a struggle that is part of a natural phenomenon that has always been happening. I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Doc?
Okay, so I am always suspicious of anybody who starts talking about nature having cycles. And the reason I say that is that you are giving agency to something which in your own worldview doesn't have agency. What is nature? I mean, what is it? I mean, can someone define it? Can someone show it? Now, if you are a religious person, you are a person of faith, whether that's Muslim, ways that, it says in the Quran that, Allah has his sunnah of dealing
Yeah.
with people, and he has his own ways of dealing with creation.
Yeah.
And
Kind
if you're
of
going to,
laws in nature, like وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا, like
yeah,
that kind of thing, yeah.
yeah. Now, if you're going to go and say like that, and say that, God has these, ways in which, civilizations rise and fall and whatever, then or ecosystems change. I mean, the geological record is full of mass extinctions and full of all sorts of
Yeah.
things. If you're going to look at it from that perspective, then I can say, okay, fine, yeah, that's a possibility. But giving it this amorphous kind of, oh, this is just nature correcting itself or something like that.
Like
I
anthropomorphizing it almost, like it's a
Yeah,
being, like, and
yeah,
that's.
yeah, exactly. It's like it's the old Salafi in me would call it, it's the shirk of the atheist, of giving the attributes of God to inanimate
Inanimate,
and
yeah, yeah.
um how would you put it, unintelligent uh
Forces,
I don't, forces.
forces,
Yes, forces are
forces, yeah.
good. Forces is a very good word. Exactly. Like for example, when Dawkins
Yeah.
talks about the selfish gene, as if the gene has a brain of its own. You
But
know.
one can ask, is it not like like when we look at, like, let's take a look at viruses by their very nature, the way they infect the host, the way they infiltrate the cellular kind of bodies, the way they replicate, the way they then sometimes develop certain symptoms or trigger symptoms in the host that will lead to further kind of spread of this virus or make them more attractive to another host. It's almost as though it's intelligently done. I mean, almost. I mean, would you
Yeah,
not?
yeah. Well,
It
well,
seems
well
like
yes.
very,
I,
yeah.
I, I mean, for me as a Muslim, I believe, of course, it's intelligently done. There's a creator. There's a creator that has created these things, and of course, Allah has created, just as He has created man and He has created the planets and the stars and the moons and whatever. He has created viruses and He has created each of these with a purpose.
Of
You know,
course.
and if the purpose of the virus is to propagate itself by infecting, well, one of the things that I have been contemplating and pondering about over these, whilst being in these quarantine phases, we often think of the punishment of God upon a nation being something cataclysmic, like a big earthquake, like the way the Ad and Thamud are discussed in the Quran, you know,
Yeah.
whilst actually, the righting of wrongs by God, if He so desires, He can do in whatever way He wishes.
But
And if the way that He wishes to do so is with a virus which infects people, decreases the labor force, makes countries much poorer than they were even months ago, earlier,
yeah.
puts people out, out on the streets, then that is perfect in my worldview and in
Yeah.
my philosophy. That's perfectly feasible.
I mean,
So
I agree with you, Doc, but I would like to just clarify here. You see, I believe in, and I was saying this in an earlier discussion, that look, as Allah says regarding many things, including the COVID situation right now, crisis, that فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ, that there is an ibrah in everything. We
mhm,
can take heed that how Allah questions that, were there not certain nations like the Qawm Ad who really kind of boasted of their strength? Were there not other civilizations that were brought to their knees, and today you see no sign of them? وَلَن تَجِدَ لَهُمْ, you won't even hear a whisper about them today, and yet they reigned so mighty, and
yeah,
and they were so huge, and their power was insurmountable, and yet how the mighty have fallen. Now,
exactly.
but so in that sense, how Allah, that this something that is microscopic, invisible to the naked eye, can bring the world to a standstill, and despite our immense power, our nuclear technologies, our the way we have dominated the globe, our domineering of the environment, yet we can't handle
Yeah,
something that is invisible. And this, if it's going to be anything, it can bring us closer to our creator by fathoming that. That is
yeah.
something which I totally agree, endorse, and I would teach. But then there is a distinction in saying that, is this a punishment from God for people, or
No,
is
yeah,
so some
I,
people are saying that God has sent this to punish, for example, China and Iran, and then now He's punishing the world with it. I mean,
okay.
I think these are slightly two different things.
Yeah, no,
One is
I would agree
recognizing
with
the
you.
glory and the magnificence and the power of Allah in His creation, and how
Yeah,
we are ultimately nothing in
yeah,
comparison to that.
yeah.
And one is
I,
in saying, yeah,
yeah, I agree with you entirely. I agree with you entirely. None of us know the mind of God.
true,
None of us know what His intentions are, you know, and um, and so I would be very wary of, our kind of South Asian Maulvis have this tendency of saying, "ये देखो अल्लाह का अज़ाब आ गया, चाइना ने उइगरों के साथ क्या क्या करा, इसका वास्ते
yeah,
चाइना में ऐसी गलीज बीमारी डाली, etc., etc." This kind of stuff, and you're like, you're basing this upon what exactly? You're basing
yeah,
this upon what exactly? Do you know the mind of your Lord? No, you don't. So I do take your point that we cannot jump to conclusions. But at the same point, again, going back to your previous point about taking an ibra from everything,
Of course, of
looking,
course, of course.
looking at it and saying, well, is this what happens when you push an ecosystem to the limit? Is this what happens when, you have massive populations eating, basically bush meat and all sorts of creatures, leading to transmission of viruses,
Exactly. No, thank you, Doc. Because you see, that is my point. That yes, I feel we as humans are culpable, and people might say, "Oh, is this not a time for repentance?" I would agree, but what does repentance mean? Repentance from what? Repentance from having pushed, like you said, the ecosystem. Repentance from having spread and contaminated this globe with what we're doing. Repentance from. You see, what I'm trying to say is this is not a reaction to metaphysical, like, for example, I've been backbiting, which is not a good thing, let's say. Now, as a result of that, God has sent this virus. Or is it that we have, irresponsibly been handling the globe the way we have? We've been doing things, tweaking things, sometimes carelessly, sometimes. Do you see what I'm saying? So there is
No,
a reaction.
no. I see what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. I also think that the two meanings are not necessarily or the two philosophies, if you want to put it that way, are not mutually exclusive. There are times
Sure,
when,
sure.
when just from an experiential point of view, you realize that some bad stuff is happening, and that you've done dhulm upon someone before, and you think to yourself, I wouldn't be surprised if Allah is getting me back for having done that dhulm upon someone else. So
Sure,
I think,
as a personal
yeah, yeah,
reminder.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But
So I think
yeah,
so I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive.
sure.
I think the problem comes in that people are too simplistic, and people are not nuanced enough, right? And
Sure.
people, and maybe that's the intellectual level that they're at. Maybe that's the intellectual level that's the only way that they can make sense of the world. And if that is the way that, Allah has given them the faculties, and that is the a
Yeah,
way
because
that,
I am fine with people taking themselves to account. The problem is when they take others to account for these subjective feelings. So a person, like, if I felt that, you know what, look, I'm suffering now, and last month or 2 months ago, I was being so arrogant about something, and look how, in my mind, this may be a kind of punishment. Let's say I'm subjectively experiencing that this is a punishment from God to remind me not to be arrogant. That, I think that personally, I think there's no problem with that. A person personally thinking that. The issue I find is when I say to you that we are suffering because you have been sinning. You see, now imposing on others your subjectivity is what I have the problem with. Not on you as a personal thing. I think you're right. Most of the world, they do get by with, humans get by with stories, and to most of the world, this is what people get by with. Look, that Allah is punishing us, or this is happening and that's happening, and if they want, that's fine. The problem is when they export that and kind of project it onto others.
see, the that would show to me a fundamental lack of understanding of the human condition. If so, for I'll illustrate in an example, if I may, a
Of
completely different
course.
example, but an example. So you may pray in a particular way. For example, you do your salah, maybe you do rafa then, for example, right?
Just
And
so the public know that Doc is also Maliki.
yes, I've also been converted to the way of Medina.
The School of Medina. No,
Yeah,
carry on.
through the same teacher as
Through
well,
the
it
same
seems.
teacher. Doc is currently studying with Sheikh Sidi Iqbal, who I do hope to get on the show as well soon. I feel one of the most profound minds, especially on Islamic thought within the UK. I personally feel that's my personal experience, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you as well. The depths of knowledge, that he has, and he'll probably have a go at me for saying so, but I see a true man of God there.
Absolutely.
I don't see a Molvi. I see a man of God.
Absolutely.
And then there's a qualitative difference. But anyway, so yeah, so being my as Mufti said, I'm Maliki as well. But I'll just give the example of whatever it may be, whatever madhab or
Sure,
muqtaba
sure, sure.
that
That
you
was
follow. Yeah,
side note, side note.
But
Irrelevant.
say for example, I pray in one way, and I meet someone and he prays in a different way. Okay,
Sure.
now that person may have been very much like, why aren't you praying the way I'm praying? Why aren't you praying the way I'm praying? Why aren't you praying? Why are you praying like this? Why are you not following the sunnah? Or why are you not doing this? Or why are you not doing that? And to me, my response has always been, you think about your prayer and I'll think about my prayer. Because ultimately, God is going to ask you about yours and God's going to ask me about mine. You have fundamentally misunderstood the human condition. The human condition is that we are responsible for ourselves and what come within our responsibility. We are not here to argue and say that my version of the truth is right or my version of this is correct. That's not believe, to do good deeds, to extol people towards the haqq, to extol people towards patience. That's Surah Asr.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're here to do. So concentrate on yourself.
Absolutely.
And so therefore I second your point in 100%. If you want to subjectively think about that and say, yeah, God's teaching me a lesson because I was an arrogant so and so the other, and I thought of myself as the big man, and now God's giving me a bit of a thappar back, yeah, then that is completely, that is sensible. But you then saying, no, God is punishing because of what you have done and what you have done, what they have done. Yeah, तुम्हारे को क्या फिक्र पड़ती है, क्या फर्क पड़ता है?
Yeah.
अल्लाह के सामने तुम्हारे को वो बात करने का नहीं है.
Yeah.
कहीं को इतना, why are you so bothered? Why are you so bothered? If so and so does something that you disagree with, let him do it. He'll answer to God. You're not going to answer for him.
Exactly.
And if he's right, alhamdulillah, and if you're right, alhamdulillah, inna al binniya, everything is but by intention.
Absolutely.
Khalas. So it's more of a faulty understanding,
Of course. And this understanding that, look, we can keep the subjectivity as we please, but that should not stop us from trying to always proactively fix or remedy the situation. So human beings, we should be trying to use our akal. So right now, with this current crisis, people should be working on vaccines or should be working on antidotes. We should be exhausting our kind of intellect. I know some Molvis have and Imams, surprisingly, some religious folk have started saying, well, the solution is, I don't know, black seeds. It's today saw a video of somebody saying it's some kind of Arab spices called sumacs because the Prophet appeared to somebody in a dream. Some people are saying, well, the solution is we're going to do a bunch of adhans every day, and hopefully this will scare off COVID-19. Which obvious, I mean, there's some thoughts on this, but then coming back to this actual discussion on the vaccines and where are we on that, and your insight as a medical practitioner.
As far as I understand about the vaccine program, there's lots of people who are, looking into it. A vaccine is eminently possible with the strain of virus that exists. Yeah. So this COVID-19 is something that can be vaccinated against, as opposed to something such as, say, HIV, for example. Yeah. But producing a safe vaccine is not an easy process, and even at the best of times, takes up to a year before
because there's like 3 or 4 phase trials it has to go through.
Exactly, and you do not want the treatment to be worse than the disease, because you do not.
Because I've heard that the MERS vaccine caused a lot of side effects in medical practitioners on the front
Yeah,
line who took it, if
yeah,
I'm
but yeah.
correct.
I mean, we see this every year. Every year there is a cohort of patients, and GPs will tell you about this much more than I can as a hospital doctor. But you will always see a cohort of patients who are given the seasonal flu vaccine,
Yeah.
and then they develop proper full-blown flu and are quite unwell. You
Because
know.
the immune system can't cope with it? Is that what we're saying? Or
Well, I
what
mean,
are we...
because what are you doing with the vaccination? What is the
Because
underlying premise of a
I
vaccination?
thought they inoculate a kind of like a cellular portion of this virus so the body develops its own immune against it, immunizes itself.
Yeah. So basically, okay, so you're right, but so the basic premise is you are giving someone a small shot of the disease,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that the body develops a immune response so that when it does encounter a larger concentration of the pathogen, it can mount a proper
Rather
yeah,
pathogen.
it can mount a full immune response towards that. So the first vaccines that you used to get were like TB vaccines,
Yeah.
right? Um, and they would actually cause you to have TB, very, very mild, yeah. But you would have that, and then you would then be immune now for the rest of your life, because you'd now built up an immunity towards that, and then as science progresses, you then move away from what are called live vaccines to inactive vaccines, where you figure out, okay, what portion of the virus or the pathogen is the active part that is causing that the immune system needs to defend against, yeah, and then you're inoculating people with that. So you're then giving them, just maybe a couple of specific protein chains or specific,
Yeah.
strands of DNA that the body then recognizes, so that when the full blown thing turns up,
Yeah.
the body is like, oh, and we know how to deal with this. Okay,
Exactly.
you know. Um, again, actually, just on the side note, if this isn't again another proof for the existence of God, I don't know what is, because I mean, to
COVID
have a
19?
yeah, but I mean, no, I mean
I'm
the
not
idea,
sure.
the idea that an immune system can, be modulated, and if it's
Wow.
exposed to something once, that it can then,
Fight it off.
yeah, fight it off. Um, you know, uh, to quote Sidi Iqbal, अक्लमंद को सिर्फ इशारे की जरूरत है.
मगर कभी as to quote मौलाना अब्दुल रहीम लिम्बादा, कभी अल्लाह मियाँ की तरफ से भी इशारे आते हैं. In
अरे
dreams, in
लिम्बादा
dreams.
साहब, ला लिम्बादा साहब, लिम्बादा साहब, लिम्बादा साहब. अरे रे 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 रे. As you know, I used to spend a lot of time. Before I followed a madhab, I was very much involved with a lot of Salafis and Ahlul Hadith,
Yeah, you
and
were.
I must say, we used to say some silly stuff, yeah, but you Deobandis have really you.
You.
I don't want to get sectarian about this, yeah, but man, you guys come up with some funky stuff sometimes, man.
I totally agree. It's amazing the. I don't know whether desis are at the top of the list of coming up with the most funkiest, or whether, I
I
mean, Arabs do as well, but I don't know. But I've seen
You're
desis
probably
like,
right. You're probably right. It's more of a circumstantial thing. It's more of it's the fact that it's desis, and
yeah,
and desis happen to be Brilvis and Deobandis in general.
yeah, yeah.
Those are the two major denominations.
No.
So you're probably right. It's probably that. But some of the stuff, was just. I was like, it's the year 2020. I can't believe people are talking about, so and so came to me in a dream and told me that we must not close the masajid, or this will happen,
Yeah,
or so and so.
what is, yesterday I saw this live discussion, it's on Facebook, between Mufti Taqi Saab and Allama Javed Ghamti Saab, and it was like a live discussion. They've been phoned in, both of them, on some kind of TV show where Javed Ghamidi Sahab was saying, obviously, you need to shut these masajid and things like this. And Mufti Taqi, I was shocked, arguing that the fara'id of the obligatory part of a prayer must be offered in the masjid. Abbe, yaar, Doc, what is going on here, yaar?
I mean, okay. I mean, you are far more learned than I am, mashallah, in Islamic sciences. But as far as I understand it, if we're going to start with the fiqh of it all,
Yeah.
in the Hanafi madhab, salah in jama'ah is not fard.
It's not fard.
No, no,
Exactly.
it's sunnah muakkada, if I
Yeah,
remember
exactly.
correctly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's only amongst the Hanabila,
That's true.
and therefore you see it in the in the Gulf states and in Saudi and whatever. They'll be very strict about going to the Jamaat and going to the Salah and whatever. So number one, I don't understand exactly where Mufti Taqi Usmani has even come up with that opinion, since he is supposed to be one of the most preeminent Hanafi jurists in the
I
world.
was
At the
seriously
moment.
disappointed with that. I
Yeah.
was like, I can't believe this kind of irresponsible.
I mean, again, disclaimer before the haters hate. I have respect. Mashallah, Mufti Taqi Usmani have great knowledge, much more than I will probably ever be. Same with Javed Khamdi Saab,
But
who
Javed Ghamidi
also is
Sahab was
someone.
actually saying that we should shut the masjids and everything.
No,
He
no,
was
no.
saying
But I'm just giving everybody, their due.
due respect.
And that उनके सामने हम कौन है, हम क्या है, हम
फिर
कुछ भी
भी
नहीं.
यार
you know
पता नहीं
yeah
यार
le-
कॉमन
le- le-
सेंस भी
le-
एक
लेकिन
चीज है
le- le- le-
यार
लेकिन 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 I I have very strong feelings about this obsession that uh, especially the South Asian Desi Muslim communities have about keeping the masajid open. That they, even when all the information about COVID was coming out, all the things about social distancing, all the discussions, they would come out with things like, oh, the Buddha, the elders should stay at home, and they shouldn't do wudu in the masjid, and just come in and go out, but they wouldn't close it. They wouldn't close it because, and it would frustrate me as a medical professional, because it would be like, you don't understand how this disease spreads. This disease is very infectious.
yeah
You can
highly
be
infectious.
a carrier without having any symptoms. You could meet someone, and you could then, having greeted them, not have the virus, go home and then give it to your elderly mother.
Yeah.
And your elderly mother is not necessarily going to do well on a ventilator, right? Or in critical care. And it just seemed like they just couldn't get it through their skulls, right?
Or
And
maybe they get it, but they say, like some of our, mashallah, Tablighi Jamaat Hazrat, because the Tablighi Jamaat Hazrat are still going full swing, as I hear, and they say, koi baat nahi, yaqeen hai Allah Ta'ala pe. And there's like, COVID, ये भी यकीनी बात है और हमारा तवक्कुल भी यकीनी है यार. This world can't cope with that much yaqeen.
ask them if they lock their doors at night. Ask them if they put a seatbelt on when they get in the car.
They
Ask them
probably
if
don't put a seatbelt, but the doors, I definitely think. When it comes to money, do they just leave their money just there like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Do they leave their keys out in the open? This is not the sunnah. This is not the prophetic way. The prophetic way, as we all know, is you tie up your camel and then you have trust in God. You are refusing to tie up your camel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're gonna have trust in
In
God.
fact, I heard some of the, I think it was the Gaza cases of COVID. They were traced, I think it was Gaza, the
Yeah.
Palestine, it was traced back to, they had been on Jamaat, Tablighi
Yes,
Jamaat.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Tabligh Jamaat went to Gaza and gave them COVID.
They go, have you brought aid? They go,
Because
chalo aid ka pata nahi, magar we brought you COVID.
Yeah, because ironically, Gaza was one of the most secure places a most unlikely place to get it, because of the massive restrictions that the Israelis and the Egyptians have put on their borders, and getting in and out. That actually, it's very difficult, would have been very difficult naturally for
to
somebody
infiltrate
from
that
yeah
society.
to get there exactly.
मगर
And
ईमान और
mashallah,
यकीन की जहाँ बात हो, अल्लाह
ah,
जहाँ जमाते तश्कील हो.
yeah, ठीक है. As I said, don't lock your door at night, then, innit? And all the other things that which you just don't eat any food. Allah rizq deta hai. Don't get a job.
Yeah.
Don't get a job. Allah rizq deta hai. Dene wala hai unhe. Yeah. Come on, come on, grow up, right?
Honestly,
Grow
and I
up.
can't believe why haven't the emirs spoken up on this?
Okay, now I'm going to be controversial here, and I'm going to say
कोई
that it's
बात
all
नहीं
to do
यार.
with money.
Welcome to my world. Be
Yeah,
controversial.
yeah. It's all down to money. Okay,
Money,
it's
yeah. Cha-ching! Cha-ching, people, cha-ching.
the masajid and the Darul Ulooms and the Madinatul Ulooms and all the other facilities that belong to all the mosques of all different denominations within this country are all charitable organizations. Okay, they run on the money that is donated to them by the congregations that they serve. Okay, now whether that is Sunni, Barelvis, Shia, Deobandi, Ahle Hadith, Salafis, whatever. Now and so therefore, दुकान चलने के लिए दुकान खुली रहना चाहिए, right? But for the masjid to be running, the masjid has expenses and the masjid has needs money, and I have no problem with that if you're transparent about it.
I'll be honest, like we need money, people.
Yeah.
We need
So
money.
for example, Green Lane shut its doors. Green Lane Masjid in Birmingham, one of the larger
Largest.
Salafi masjids in Birmingham,
UK.
have a lot of
In
experience
the
with
UK,
them.
one of the largest in the UK, I think.
Yeah, yes, you're right. And they were one of the first to close their doors and say we're no longer going to do Jummah and the congregational Salah. But then they sent out things saying that this is actually going to cause us a significant financial deficit, and we would request if people could set up a standing order for £5, £10, whatever, that we could get monthly from them so that we can keep the lights on. Right?
I respect that. That's very. I really respect that.
Yeah, and
for being so honest like that.
Yeah, you're just being honest. You're just being honest, right? You're just saying that, look, we run on your donations, so that's it. Now, if the other masajid were just honest like that and just said that, look, we need to keep the masjid going, because if we don't keep if we don't, then we lose our revenue stream, and then masjid band padti hai. Yeah. Well, fine, that's fine, okay, but don't now try and clothe it with trying to make it into some kind of dini thing. Don't try
melodramatic.
Don't try and say
दीवारें रोएंगी यार, कोई नमाज पढ़ने वाला नहीं है यहाँ पे. The walls will. I heard a speech. The person saying, "यार ये दीवारें रोएंगी यार." You're thinking, all right, यार, calm down. This year's Oscar goes to.
This year's Oscars goes to so and so Maulana Saab. Now, it's just be honest about it, man. And if you need the money, you need the money. Fair enough, man.
Enough,
we
fair
understand.
I mean, it's not a.
And I encourage everybody. One of the things that my father taught me. One thing that I, inshallah, have taught my own children is, whenever you go to a masjid, any masjid you go to, wherever you go, just put something in the box.
Whether it's very nice, though.
Whether it's a penny, whether it's a pound. Yeah, these things will stack up for you on the day of judgment. Yeah,
and there is an art of giving in it that you have to inculcate really in children.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah.
And so just wherever you go, just give something. So that's fine, but don't try and clothe it in this kind of stuff. If you're going to talk about it, who are the most extreme of the people, of the sects that are around? The Salafis, the Wahhabis, the Saudis. Okay, what did Saudi Arabia do? Saudi Arabia
shut the Kaaba down.
They shut the Kaaba down. They shut the Medina down. Yeah. Now there's only one saf now in the Kaaba, and that is the cleaners.
Fair play.
Why did they do that? Because they knew what this disease was. They understood, and they understood that the sanctity of human life is more important than the congregation of prayer like this. And for
Exactly.
all those people who's and I don't care what denomination you are, and you can hate on me as much as you want. Please backbite me as much as you like. I have many sins that need to be got rid of. Okay, but for all those people who sat there and said no, the masajid shouldn't be closed. We'll keep them open. We'll do this. We'll do that. We'll do this. We'll do that. I would want to know what answer you are going to give to your Lord on the day of judgment when you stand there and say that we endangered our community. We may even be responsible, indirectly for harm and death
For the
of your
deaths.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If you can live with that, right? Then and you can still keep your masajid open. Then I'm sorry, I don't know what Islam you're following. I don't know. You
Subhanallah.
know.
That's so true.
You
If
know.
Islam is not about the love of humanity, then it is nothing. It's a zero-sum game. It's either about that or it isn't.
Yeah.
And
Because if we love God, then we should love God's creation. Yeah? Because God has created everything. These things, me and you and all this all belongs to God. This all is a creation of His. We are the kind of we are the muhafiz. We are the people who are supposed to look after this. Okay? And instead of looking after, instead of even being ambivalent, you are actively causing harm to people in the name of the religion. Then, as I said, I'm sorry, I do not understand what the deen. I have a different Islam to you, mate.
yeah,
I'm sorry. You know.
absolutely,
You know.
absolutely, very well said, Doc. I
You
totally,
know.
100% second everything you're saying.
You
That's
know.
so true, and it's so disappointing. I feel sometimes some of the leadership, in Muslim countries especially, I feel that they're almost doing it on purpose so they can be seen as defiant against the authorities, or like I'm kind of you can't tell me what to do, and then obviously justifying it with Islam, which doesn't make any sense either. But it's
Innal amala bin niyya. Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Worship. So your worship should be for Allah. Your worship shouldn't be to put two fingers up to the man.
Exactly.
It,
Absolutely. I mean,
if your worship is just so that you can piss your regime off,
yeah,
then you get what you intended, right? Just don't expect much on the day of judgment.
yeah. And the catastrophe. It's not even the catastrophe where, because in those countries, I mean, there's no health system. I mean, in the UK, bringing it to this, here the catastrophes that we are facing within the UK and I suppose the West by extension. I mean, you're witnessing this firsthand, are you not, Doc?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it, and as I said, I too have been under quarantine because one of my family members got COVID, and so I had to self quarantine. So I haven't been in the hospital for a couple of weeks. But my colleagues from other hospitals, and in fact, any hospital within the region,
Yeah.
they will tell you that it's an unprecedented situation, truly without precedent, where patients are deteriorating in front of people's eyes. They're coming in quicker. It's like a production line. Forget even that. I heard from a brother who is involved with the burials at Green Lane Masjid, the funeral service. And he said that it is like a production line. One comes in, one comes, we're
I
having this, we are overloaded with dead bodies.
I've read today something about a mortuary being set up in Birmingham. Have you heard of this with a capacity of
I,
1,500 or 1,000 or something like this? Is this
no,
just
no,
fake news or what is this about?
I know that a temporary hospital has been set up
In Birmingham.
in Birmingham. Yes, at the NEC. So at the NEC is going to be converted into a temporary hospital. They're also going to be doing that with I think the Excel Centre in London. And props to the boxer Amir Khan.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolute hats off to him.
Yeah, I think I don't
He's
know where.
donated his wedding hall. He's had a
Yeah,
wedding venue
yeah,
site
yeah. I
for
think it's in
5 million. I
Manchester.
think it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
worth.
I think it's in Manchester, I think, or Bolton or something like that.
God.
And
I'm surprised
so
there isn't more of this happening. More people are not kind of giving, or the government are not asking, or what? I mean, why is
no. See, the thing with the news is the thing with
yeah,
the news, and we all know this, right? And I'm sure you know this more than me, is that you can look at one piece of news and you can look at it in different angles, right?
yeah,
And or you can be looking at one piece of news and ignoring another piece of news here. So, for example, there have been literally hundreds of thousands of people who have volunteered to come in to
yeah,
work in the NHS. People who are unskilled,
yeah,
people who have no medical training, but they've gone back to help out. Whether that may be just being portering, carrying
yeah.
supplies, donating their van. A lot of these people aren't Muslim.
No,
It
of
shows.
course, most
Yeah,
are not.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, and it shows the innate fitrah that Allah has put within people.
تلك
The
فطرة الله فطر الناس عليها.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
it comes out in these situations. So you can spin it one way and say, well, why have they only made three extra or two extra hospitals? Or you can spin it and say, well, 15,000 nurses have gone back, after retirement. I got a text message from a the old sister of the A&E department I used to work at many years ago when I was a junior doctor, who is retired, who is enjoying her retirement in Spain or somewhere else or the other, and after having come back, has now decided to go back into work to help out. She doesn't need to do that. She's not a young woman herself. She's in her 60s, you know. So I think the news or the situation or the halat, hal or halat
Yeah.
depend a lot upon your nazariya. It depends on
I
how you
mean,
want to look at it.
here are some. I just want to, Doc, bring up. This is, I believe, he's the chief editor of Lancet. I've got, I think, Richard Horton. I'm just going to bring. If you can you hear that,
The-
Doc?
yeah, yes, I can't hear it, but I am aware of what
So I'm just
the distinguished
the
editor said.
viewers can hear it, right? So let's.
Was hitting cities. People were being admitted to hospital, admitted to intensive care units and dying. And the mortality was growing. We knew that 11 weeks ago. And then we wasted February when we could have acted. Time when we could have ramped up testing, time when we could have got personal protective equipment ready and disseminated. We didn't do it. I'm hearing that not just personal protective equipment is not available, it's the wrong kind of personal protective equipment. What we have isn't even WHO standard. We're putting our health workers, who we've just all clapped here, in the front lines without the armour they need to defend themselves. They're wearing surgical masks which are not WHO standard. They're wearing thin plastic aprons which are not standard, and they're wearing rubber gloves which only cover their wrists, exposing their arms to danger, jeopardy. That is nothing short of a national scandal. How could we allow this to happen? The hypocrisy of clapping NHS workers and yet the government not supporting them to go into that front line is tragic. And it was preventable. I'm sorry to say, but it was preventable.
So you've had him here, chief editor of Lancet, saying that look, that we've got people on the front line who are not. If we're going to be, he's saying that let alone they don't have PPE. The PPE they do have is inadequate. It's not up to WHO standards. The aprons are too thin. They're not being provided the apparatus they require. They've had a couple of months, at least weeks and weeks, of an opportunity to prepare. The UK hasn't really prepared. They haven't really seemed to have responded in any meaningful way. So what do you? I mean, you're on the front line. You're familiar with. Sorry, somebody, Doc. I think your son in the back is calling you out. So I'll just give. I mean, if you right. So, I mean, they're saying all of these things. They're saying that people, the UK government has not been acting responsibly. It's not been acting, given its resources that it has, given its opportunities. So, especially since Doc is on the front line, he's somebody who's seeing the reality on the ground. He's somebody who is witnessing this on a day, even though you've been in quarantine, but on a daily basis. So, what would you have to, I mean, say about that? Does that reflect what you're seeing? Is the government, because what we're hearing there, the government, okay, even since it started to act, it's still quite kind of sloppy almost. It's not really okay. It's telling people to stay at home, which is great, but in addition to that, why is action so slow? It's not like the UK is a lazy country, and it's not like the UK aren't resourceful, and it's not like they truly lack wealth. Why is the reaction, once they have decided to react, still so slow? Why are there not 10 hospitals already set up, functioning? All you need is buildings, which they've already got. You can fly in the equipment, air cargo it. You can do all of these things. You can set whatever PPE you need, fly it in. If any country that will make it, bring it in. Whatever, you can bring in, like you've mentioned, volunteer workers. You've got the soldiers who are already paid, standing soldiers. I mean, if you need manpower to move things around, yet nothing is really. I mean, people say, I don't know whether this is of any impact or not, but like disinfecting the streets or what China was doing and things like this, nothing is really being seen, despite firm action being, now we're in the stage of firm action. So what are your thoughts?
Number one, I'd have to say that the results of any actions that are done are always delayed. So the quarantining and the lockdown that we are experiencing now, we will see the results of that in 2 weeks' time because of the lag time. The reason that we are now seeing an increase in cases is because people weren't following government guidance 2 weeks ago.
Or is it that they are just discovering, or is it due to increased testing? I mean, what's the...
No. I mean, I have to be very careful with my phraseology here.
Yeah.
I think that upon reflection, there were opportunities that could have been utilized better. I also I think that as a general population, especially in the Western world, at the general population, we did not take this seriously. This was the kind of thing that happened in them third world tropical countries. This didn't happen here. And finally, fundamentally, the leaders come from the people. So if the people, so if the general ambiance, if the general collective kind of thought process is of, wow, it's not much really, is it? It's just, you got a mortality of 1%. That's not that bad, is it? It's just whatever, right? Then, that is going to have an effect on people who are in power.
Yeah. I mean, like Boris Johnson himself was saying, I'm going around shaking hands with people who've got COVID.
So again, as I said, I think as a populace, we didn't take it seriously.
Sure.
I think the medical profession took it very seriously from the beginning.
Okay, fair.
I was very, very pleasantly surprised by not just my own, but other hospitals within the West Midlands region, for the plans and the kind of contingencies that they were looking into quite early on in this crisis, and I think they have done the best that they can do. Other things, as I said, I have to be very careful
I
with what
understand
I
that,
say.
Doc, but okay.
I have to be very careful what I say. And, if it's a case of having a go at the government, well, I can have,
No, it's not about. No, it's not about just taking a go at the government. I mean, I'm not interested in that. Just a lot of questions that people have. Like, so one thing on testing. Would testing more people be? Is it useful? Is it something that should have been done? And why were the NHS frontline not tested? Was that a legal loophole? What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, this is my personal opinion.
Of course.
My personal opinion. I know the WHO guidance was to test, okay?
Sure.
And the countries that did do a lot of testing, such as Japan and South Korea, they had a much, they were able to control the spread,
Flatten the curve.
and flatten the curve exactly, in a way that a lot of other countries have not been able to do so. Okay, the counter argument was that the test itself wasn't particularly accurate. It had what we call a false negative, a significant false negative.
What does that mean?
So what does that mean? So a false negative is when the test says you haven't got it, but you do in reality. Okay, so and so that it's like that is the worst kind of statistical error that you want. There's lots of statistical errors that can occur with any kind of test that you use. Like a false positive is you're flagged up as having it when actually you don't have it. A false negative is the worst because it's saying, well, you haven't got it, you're fine, go home. But actually you do. Now, the numbers that are quoted vary wildly in the literature, but I have seen numbers as much as 25% saying of false negatives. So
How much percent?
25.
25. Wow, 1 out of every 4.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how reliable those numbers are, but I have seen those numbers quoted up on
In case those numbers are also a false negative.
May well be. Therefore, therefore, the point that I'm trying to say is that if you have a patient, I'm thinking of this from a kind of a realistic perspective. If you have a patient who comes to hospital with symptoms which are consistent with COVID, then testing them isn't going to make a damn difference to what you're going to do, because you're going to treat them as if they've got COVID, whether they've got it or not. Okay, and the tests that you have, there are some serious doubts about it. Now, so therefore, as I said, I can see the argument that maybe the government make for not doing this whole amount of testing that the WHO recommended. I think it's a good development that they are testing the NHS frontline staff.
Why the delay? Out of curiosity. Was it just because they needed the staff there, and by this way you'd have to send them home or to quarantine? Is that the delay? Or
there's a famous quote by Napoleon which says,
not tonight, Josephine.
Do not ascribe to malice that which can be adequately explained by incompetence.
वाह 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 अब भी दिलकश है तेरा हुस्न मगर क्या कीजिए. See, Doc, he has it, people. Doc.
Yeah, so my personal belief is that just as the general populace, because remember what we're seeing now is the results of what we did or didn't do 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah, and because the great British public or the great British establishment, whatever you want to put it, did not take this threat seriously, you know, in a way that other countries did, right? In a way that the WHO did, I think that leads to the consequences that we've seen. To ascribe other motives
Yeah.
is, well, it's unhelpful.
Okay.
It doesn't
Sure,
make
fair
it,
enough. I'm
yeah,
with you. I'm with
it's
you.
unhelpful.
I mean, I
It's
think
not,
it says it all that it could just be down to incompetence, like you said.
it's not productive. It doesn't
Sure.
help. And nearly all the hospitals I am aware of had contingencies built in for the fact that a certain proportion of their NHS frontline staff will not be there because of contracting COVID or
I
having
see.
a COVID relative. So the hospitals were planning for that anyway,
I see.
right? So I think, you know,
So fair
uh,
enough.
uh,
That part
uh,
makes sense.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, you
with the
know,
PPE, right? You know this thing with masks, for example, or the aprons or stuff. I mean, do these masks even help? Do they not help? What about the masks the public have? What are your thoughts on this, Doc? Because some people say, look, this, of course it does, it prevents it. Some people say, well, they're useless anyway. But I
I
don't
think
know.
it depends on the context. It depends on the context. If you are a nurse on an intensive care unit looking after a patient with coronavirus, then the level of personal protective equipment PPE that you require is going to be different to someone walking the streets. I've been, well, I whenever I very rarely, obviously, I've been outside, but you know, when I was outside, I was seeing some people going around in surgical masks or whatever, just randomly, you
I
know.
saw a video clip of a lady going in, a woman going in the Zorb ball. She was kind of. I thought that looks so fun.
Yeah.
I want to do that. I want to do that.
That can be your PP. Yeah,
Honestly, I would love that.
yeah. Uh, so um so anyway, so the point that I was trying to get across is that I think a lot of it depends on the context, and I think that depending on the context, that's the PPE that you should have, and I would defer again to you know, WHO guidelines on what people should have. Different hospitals are doing different things. Um, and I'm not going to say more than
No,
that.
so Doc, you know, today there was this announcement being shared about the from a government page about coronavirus is no longer HCID or something. It's no longer a highly, or sorry, no longer highly infectious. Let me bring up the actual, and nobody seemed to understand what on earth that meant. I mean, have you come across this already, or?
No, I haven't. I'm gonna let me have a look at this. This
There's
is
there was something that was quite. Let me just bring this up if I can as well. And so I'd seen it on a few. Let me see. Un momento, I had it right here. I'm just gonna. Right, okay. Let me go up. Here it is. Alright, I'll just bring it across to. I'll try and bring it up on the screen as well. Just one moment. Okay. I'm gonna try and bring that up right here. One moment. See, technology, people. People that think, haha, Mufti doesn't know this stuff. One moment. Un momento. Un momentico. Right now. Guess video. Right. Alright, so. Oh no, that's wrong. I'm gonna stop.
The message from
Un momento.
I think you might be referring to
I'm bringing this
whether
up. One moment.
whether virus can be as a pandemic.
Right,
Um, I,
so.
I mean, that is the only things that I'm finding on a Google search.
No, I'm bringing it up right here. I'm just waiting for it to just load. One moment. Okay, here it is. It's just going to take 1 second. See, I need a bunch of secretaries around here just working around.
Yeah, they're called kids.
There. All right, got it. Cool, awesome, doc. Right, I'm just bringing that un momentico, right, you, and what I'll do is I'll get that to right there. It is. Okay, now I'm just going to doc get you in on that as well. One moment. Right, just so you can see that as well. Can you see that, doc?
Okay, let's have a look.
So
This is old news.
but it says as of 19 March 2020.
Yeah, what's the date today?
Okay, yeah, but okay, so but this is saying it's no longer considered to be high consequence infectious disease (HCID) in the UK. Is that? I mean, but I'm thinking last year that I mean by the 19th, isn't that close to, when they went into quarantine? So what on earth is?
I
Have you?
I don't know why they have come up with that.
Is
That's what
that
I'll say. I don't understand that.
you don't understand? Because I read it, I couldn't even understand what it meant. To be honest with you, you obviously just made me.
I didn't understand. I don't understand that, and I especially don't understand that given the time when it was written. It was written on the 19th of March, and the world has changed significantly since the 19th of March.
Right. So, I mean, I just bringing up here what. Right, so I mean, I read that and it just made me basically just feel stupid. I was like, what does that even mean? I can't even understand what it's saying. So
Yeah, I think it's something to do with the classification of pandemics and whatever. I think it's an academic stroke moot point. Uh I wouldn't give much importance to
yeah,
it.
cool. No, that sounds fine. I mean, so Doc. Also, your thought on I have answered this already on my Monday nights with Mufti. I said, well, speaking about ghusl and burial for the deceased from who are fallen victim to COVID-19. I've said that ghusl. I don't believe personally. I did give the fatwa. It does not need to be done. The obligation isn't there. And I've said that if the scientific and medical advice said about contamination of the ground with burial, if it said that, which I think they made an exemption for religious rites, but still, if it did, I said that in accordance with the fatwa of the Egyptian ulama, the Dar al-Ifta al-Misriya, Sheikh Ibrahim Shawqi Ibrahim Allam, and Abdullah bin Bayya regarding Ebola, the same fatwa that cremation could be done if required. But I mean, what are your thoughts as somebody who also has, you're interested
Okay.
in religion
So,
and medicine?
so I mean, I will defer to the fatwa of the ulama on on this. What I would say is that the legislation that has been put forward, which involves the cremation of bodies rather than burial, is not the legislation is not targeted towards preventing contamination.
It's not?
It's just
Okay.
as far as I understand it, and my reading of the bill that was put through Parliament, which I have looked through, and I've seen the exemptions that have been put in as well, is that it's predominantly because of capacity. There is not
Right.
that there isn't enough space in graveyards for burials, and
Seriously?
so
Isn't there?
I think in non-Muslim graveyards for a long time this has been a problem.
Okay.
In non-Muslim graveyards,
How
for
difficult is it to set up a new graveyards for the
Allahu
government?
Allahu Alam, I don't know how you would set one up, but
I mean,
yeah,
for the government, it surely can't be difficult. They just got to allot a
yeah,
piece of
well,
land.
no, I assume it goes through the council, and councils have had their spending cut over the last 10 years with Tory austerity, haven't they? So
This is the
I
thing, isn't it? When you vote for someone who considers you to be just part of a herd.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
my understanding, and I may have understood it incorrectly, but my understanding was that the issue around cremation was that if there wasn't enough capacity within the graveyards, that the local authority could compel you to cremate rather than bury. Now, I am not aware of the latest scientific evidence about contamination.
Okay. I personally
Uh,
thought it was a contamination issue.
Okay. If that is the case, and if it is the case about contamination, then again, as I said, I will defer to the ulama, the fatwa from Misr and the fatwa of Sheikh Abdullah bin Baya. I will, I'll leave it there. But that
Okay,
my
sure.
understanding has been that it was more about capacity
Okay.
rather than contamination. Allahu alam, I might be wrong.
No, you
Um,
could be right. I have on that note. I did come across they made an amendment to exempt, I think, Jewish and Muslim rights from that. I did read
we
that some of the
should we
politicians.
should thank the Lord for the Yahud.
There you go.
I tell you,
God's children,
God's children. I tell you, otherwise,
God's favorite people, the Israelites. We should thank them.
we should thank them. Otherwise, there'd be no halal meat, no circumcision, and no burials, mate. Trust me.
Yeah, that's true though. That is very true. In this country, ain't nobody gonna care about a bunch of.
What a bunch of Muslims say, yeah.
Yeah, nobody cares about us.
Props to the Bani Israel. They got themselves into positions where they safeguard their community.
Oh yeah.
I think this was something that the late Dr. Israr Ahmad said. Learn from the Bani Israel, not just learn the bad, the mistakes that they made, but learn the good that they've done as well.
No, true.
But
Right. So,
although I may well be paraphrasing him.
no, sure. Your Doc, your thoughts on this? People are saying we are 2 weeks behind Italy. Yeah. Now, even though Spain has now seemed to have superseded and potentially become the new epicenter for deaths, not for cases. I think America has become for cases, but that may just be because they're doing mass testing. Now, first of all, do you feel that is the case? And secondly, why is Italy such a fatality on this matter? Like, what do you feel that was a different strain or a different? Because there's certain theories going around that Italy had.
There is some evidence that the virus did mutate, and it was a more virulent and more potent form that was in Italy.
So you had the S and the L.
Yeah, the S and L, yeah. So there is some evidence that says that. I think the more likely reason is the fact that that area of northern Italy has a very high elderly population.
Do you really buy that though? The highest elderly population in the world is in Japan. And yet Japan didn't seem to be, and it also has a very close-knitted family communities, and they didn't seem to suffer in the same way. There's some research, Doc, that shows, not research, some investigations that have shed light on, shed light on the fact that due to all the designer Italian brands that you have, they have had, most of them are made in China, so they've had a huge influx for months on it. I mean, as it's an ongoing thing prior to this, that they would have daily a kind of like a channel between parts of Italy and China and workers, and even sometimes there were a lot of illegal kind of Chinese workers and things like this. Some evidence suggests that the virus has been present in Italy since the beginning of the year, if not since December. That before even Wuhan got locked down, it was in Italy. What are your thoughts on this, Doc?
I mean that's a possibility. That's a possibility. It can't be discounted. I'm not sure I would bet my house on that theory.
Because no,
But-
I've heard that there
but-
are
but-
so much, the ties between the Chinese labor industry and the Italian design industry are so like deeply embedded in getting stuff done, getting people having things daily being brought back, all their kind of clothes, all of this stuff is mainly made in China. It's not made in Italy itself. In addition to there's some rumors, like this part people can substantiate with the daily flights, direct flights back and forth to China and people coming, but there's also rumors about like the underworld trading. So between the Italian mafia and the Chinese triad, where they smuggled things back and forth. There's rumors. I mean, that's not obviously as clear as day, but it's something. I mean, I wonder what your thoughts are.
I mean, it's a possibility. It's a possible attack vector. It's possible. I don't think it's ever provable.
Of course. I mean, to prove something is something else. Do you feel that Italy is an anomaly, or
No.
is the Italy an inevitability?
I think Italy is the
potential
standard,
one, or-
the standard model.
The standard model, but yet we see it not. Other countries not taking suit. South Korea, Japan, other countries haven't really.
South Korea and Japan had a completely different approach to COVID when it first came. They had a completely different approach. The approach that Italy had is very similar to the approach that Spain and a lot of European countries and the UK
What is
had.
it that the other countries did that was more effective?
Early recognition, early lockdown, early testing. They took it seriously.
I see.
They saw it and they took it seriously. Whilst, as I said, maybe out of a sense of complacency, Western Europeans were a bit kind of, no, this doesn't happen to us. Yeah, I think it does, mate. If it's one thing that coronavirus has shown, is that viruses aren't racist.
Yeah, I mean, Do you? I mean, on that note, also, what are your thoughts on how you see if this virus is detected on, as the Chinese reports say, the 1st of December, means it must have been it must have been in existence since November, at the latest really, if not earlier. Now, Wuhan goes into lockdown just this year, right? So it's had several weeks of operation, maybe between 1 to 2 months of operation this virus has had. How has the rest of China not been infected so bad? How does that happen?
Number one, do you necessarily believe the integrity of the figures from the Chinese Communist Party?
I don't, but I do believe that it would be like if the whole of China was on lockdown.
So that's point number one. Point number two is that China's population is vastly concentrated along its eastern seaboard. Okay, and those provinces and Shenzhen
are more densely.
Yeah. And when
Shanghai
you
was not locked down though.
No, Shanghai, no, fair point. But when you go out west towards Tibet, towards the Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs live.
Sorry, west. Not east.
When you go out west that way, or when you go out north, up towards near the North Korean and Russian borders, those are much less sparsely populated, much less industrialized. There's been even in places within the interior, there's been big migrations from rural to urban centers. So it wouldn't surprise me. And the thing is, you can't trust anything that comes from China. You can't trust the official sources. You have no idea.
Do you not feel, Doc? Do you not feel that this came out of a Wuhan lab by accident?
I believe it's a possibility.
Because I feel that, look, China's level 4 biotech lab is just a 20-minute drive from the wet markets, yeah? This lab is China's only lab that deals with fatal, lethal viruses, and it's actually one of its pioneering work has been on, and this is on. It's nothing hidden. It did some global recognition work on coronaviruses in I think a few years back. Is it not more likely that a person gets infected from there accidentally? He is the true patient zero from which clusters emerge, maybe in the wet markets when he's there and stuff like this. If this be the case, because then China would have known. I mean, they did share the genome structure very rapidly, but they would have known this from the get-go, and they may even have potential antidotes that they are using but not sharing, even if they have a lot of risks, for example. What are your thoughts on this?
Number one, again, it's a possible theory. Number two, it's not a provable theory. Number three, it is known that this virus does exist in bats. It is known that bats are sold at the wet market.
True.
You know.
But there are wet markets all over China, not just in Wuhan.
No, I agree. Maybe this is the anesthetist in me. Yeah. Sometimes I'm not bothered about where something came from or how something happened. I want to deal with the situation as it is. I'm a person who has a problem-solving mentality, right? So at the moment, what we have is a highly infectious virus that is infecting a lot of people, that has a significant mortality rate in people who are elderly and with comorbidities. And I think our intellectual and other kind of efforts should be put forward in that vein, to try and deal with the problem, rather than looking into theories of how it originated, because I don't know what value that would give us at this moment in time. Once in the aftermath of the zombie apocalypse, we can have a proper post-mortem, as they would say in India, yeah, of how, why, and all this. But at this moment in time, the priority, I feel, has to be on the treatment of patients, the stopping of the spread, etc., rather than. I mean, these are interesting. These are interesting speculations to have, and I suppose, since we are all in quarantine and we are all, getting bored probably, and there's only so much Netflix you can watch,
That's why there's Mindtrap.
Yeah, exactly.
But speaking of treatments, Doc, your thoughts on hydroxychloroquine being used and being kind of like sized up by Donald Trump and some other countries. What are your thoughts on this?
I know that there are a number of trusts in the UK who are trialing the use of hydroxychloroquine. Whether it works, we don't know. There seems to be some evidence, what's the word I'm looking for? Some promising evidence that it is helpful in certain cases. I don't believe a word that Donald Trump ever says.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But it's not coming from him, though.
So the fact that he's bigging it up, he's probably got shares in a company that makes hydroxychloroquine.
I think he's struggling with his whole economy being shut down because America's so huge and such an industrial state, really, to shut it all down.
Don't get me started on Donald Trump, man. It's already 3:15, yeah, and we haven't even got to the questions yet.
The thing on treatments, Doc. There's these questions here that look, realistically speaking, if the NHS, let's say, or in the UK, when people come in that have COVID, that are elderly, that are part of the kind of volatile group that they're saying, the vulnerable group, the old, whatever, potentially quite serious, if they boosted them up with all kind of immune boosting drugs, in honesty, and use these kind of drugs like hydrochloroquine or other things, or even anything that would boost the immune system proactively, would they not slash the death rates by 50%? I feel they would.
I think that's a very simplistic way of looking at things.
But is it not a realistic one and a practical
No.
one?
No.
Why not? ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué,
No,
doctor?
I
¿Por qué?
guess so. The first thing that a doctor is supposed to do is first cause no harm. Okay, so you have no idea whether this concoction of stuff that you're going to be giving them is going to harm them.
But they're
You
going to
know,
die at this rate, and they are dying.
so that's
Why not
why.
explore, like...
So that's why. Well, okay. If you want to get into the economics of it, all right, there is a specific pot of money, right?
Yeah.
There's a large pot, but it's a specific pot of money which you have to allocate your staff, your equipment, your resources effectively and properly to look after your patients. Now, is it more sensible to be exploring novel alternative therapies, or doing that which you know works with the facilities that you have? So I think that it's overly simplistic and not scientifically validated to come up with something like that. Drugs vary massively in cost. A tablet of aspirin, 300 milligram tablet of aspirin, which has been shown to decrease mortality if you have one while you're having a heart attack, costs 1 pence per tablet. A anti-immune injection for, say, something like rheumatoid arthritis can cost 10,000 per course. So I think that's a bit of a
I mean,
simpler.
I
think
if I could just say, Doc, like there was certain countries did have this methodology, yeah. Like I know India is amongst them. I know South Korea was amongst them. I think Australia, that they weren't just working on vaccines and whatever, but they were exploring these kind of options, like kind of juicing them up with different things. Like there were certain studies that, and here was one, that there was a drug Coletra that was used on patients in South Korea. Now, even though it was shown as not effective against COVID, but the results showed that the death rate in Coletra patients was 15% at day 28 versus 27.1% amongst placebo patients. Now, so people were saying that even though these drugs, and that's my point, that even though some of these drugs are not killing COVID, but they are slashing the death rate. Now, you see, so this is my point. I do understand it's about money, I do understand, but really, how many patients are you even dealing with on a national scale? You're not dealing with those that are fakely like coming into hospitals. You're not even dealing with, like 50,000. You're not even dealing. So right now, currently, it would just be in several thousands that you're dealing with that are so serious. It wouldn't be that expensive. I know in the UK there's a lot of red tape. They can't kind of give something.
I don't want to come across as saying that this is a purely economic argument. It's not a purely economic argument. If the money is the issue, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm coming.
Oh, just
Sorry. I don't want it to come across as that I'm just saying that, oh, we ain't got the money to do it, or we haven't got the money to do that. Frankly, whenever you do a treatment, you have to have evidence. The paper that you quote, I haven't read. I haven't drilled into the details. I think that 15%, 27% you know, is
And that's just one drug. One drug.
but, you know, what kind of sample sizes are we looking at? What kind of null hypotheses? What kind of validations are we looking at? What is the
We're looking at
placebo?
people still
How-
alive. जिंदा बैठे हुए हैं यहाँ पे. It's like, I agree
Yeah.
with you, but I just feel sometimes thinking out the box is better.
But my point is that you need stronger evidence if you're going to do something, because you don't want a situation where you do, you know, maybe you know, these drugs have risks of their own, you know, and yeah, they may not die in the first 28 days. What about their mortality at 6 months? What about their mortality at 8 months, 12 months? You know, what about chances of probably renal failure, liver failure, something like that? You know,
No, I get you. I just wanted to
you know,
bounce that off you. What are your thoughts as a doctor?
The things need to be validated properly. Yeah. And if there is compelling evidence, that's fine. I am not an expert. As I said, I'm also been in quarantine for 2 weeks.
No, you are. You're
So
a
I don't
doctor.
know. Yeah.
I'm to घर बैठे doctor. I'm just a. Somebody said, Mufti, you ain't a doctor. Of course I ain't.
Yeah. All I'll say is that you know, it's very, correlation does not imply causation.
Of course not. But I also feel that sometimes the problem is not in what you do, but rather in action, rather in inaction. That you see, we're not doing, and it seems to be our manhaj, if I can say, that seems to be the problem, not the lack of resources or the ability. It seems to be the methodology is not right.
The biggest problem in our methodology was that we didn't take it seriously.
But what about now? We're still not taking it seriously.
No, I think we're.
I mean, we are taking it seriously, but we're not acting. There's still a lack of action.
There's a lack of action. What are you on about, man? There's a bloody quarantine. You can't go out. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a quarantine.
But, you know,
but where's the...
man can't go get his bananas from the shop. Do you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah, there's a quarantine.
You know, I'm having to sit with the, you know, they're trying to entertain 3 kids at home. Yeah, yeah. Right. You know, and you know,
divorce rates have gone through the roof.
Well, I tell you, some of the memes that have been coming out have been hilarious. That in 9 months' time, there's going to be a baby boom.
Baby boom.
You know?
Yeah. These are the post-COVID.
And they're going to be called the coronials.
The coronial.
Yeah. And that when they and in 2033, they'll be known as the quarantine-agers. Yeah. Yeah. But they will only be firstborn children.
Yeah, true.
Because the people with more than one who've already got children will not have had the time to make any more children.
Yeah, that comes. Speaking on children, a lot of people had been asking this question on cousin marriages.
Yeah, I understand. We've got some questions. We better get some.
So, if there's any questions, we can fire through people. We'll try and get some rapid round. We've been going on, keeping Doc awake. Did an extended session. Yeah, Doc isn't a vampire like us. Yes. So we've got to have mercy on our frontline staff. यार मामूली नहीं है आप यार बड़ी हस्ती बड़ी चीज है आप right so
क्या बोल रहे क्या मोटा हो गया मैं क्या बोल रहा
so one question was about cousin marriages. I don't know why people wanted that, but they wanted cousin marriages.
Okay.
And being a doctor.
Okay, so let me say that an isolated cousin marriage between, i.e., that is a cousin marriage between first cousins, in of itself is not harmful. The problem we have in our community in the UK is that we have multiple generations of first cousin marriages. You know, we have
keep it in the family.
Yeah, going back 4, 5, 6 generations of first cousins marrying each other. This is therefore going to mean that any genetic abnormalities that are present in anybody's genome, you know, none of us are perfect. We've all got some abnormalities somewhere, but they're amplified.
The genes go, yaar, phir,
yeah.
Another mirror image.
Yeah, you know,
Had karte ho yaar, maaf karo.
you're decreasing the the gene pool, and so you're increasing the likelihood of abnormalities. There is a myth that goes through a lot of Islamic folklore that this is somehow some kind of Islamic practice.
It's
It is the
Islamic to
exact
marry
opposite.
cousin, you think?
It,
That people
yeah,
think that,
I've heard that in India anyway. Oh yes, नहीं हम ये yes अच्छी बात है, नेक बात है, इसका वास्ते हम करते हैं. And it's like bollocks, mate.
Why
It's
would they
not.
think it's a Nick Bat or Islamic Bat? Why?
Why?
Because
Why?
of Fatima and Ali radiallahu anhu.
No, it's just folk. It's just folk kind of tradition. It's why? I don't. Do you think anybody's actually intellectualized it? Gone that far? Yeah, you know,
They
you
got
know.
cha.
I can. So. Therefore, I personally dissuade anybody. I mean, okay, man. If you fall in love with your first cousin, then you fall in love with your first cousin.
Fall
Yeah?
in love तो ये
I
तो
mean,
कुछ ज़्यादा ही आप खींच दिए हैं यहाँ पे.
yeah,
Fall in love नहीं, fall in bed. यहाँ पे मसला ये है with the cousin.
but as a general rule, when people are looking for rishta, I would avoid marrying within families. I think that it is better for the Muslim community in general, for the Muslim community to establish itself and become more established and embedded into the community within the British Muslim community, that
They have stronger genes.
that they marry outside. And this is one of the things that the ulama, I remember a fatwa was given by Sheikh Uthaymeen, the Salafi scholar from Saudi Arabia, who said that it is preferred that one marry outside one's tribe and one's
Absolutely.
household, so that they can bring communities together and forge new relationships where relationships didn't exist before.
It makes stronger human beings. It's something that was known. In fact, one of the ancient, one of the kind of Jahiliyyah poetry as well says, it's something about he loved a particular woman, but he says I didn't. خشية أن يضوى علي سليلها. Like he says, out of fear that my offspring from her will be weak because she's related to me. That was so the Arabs had this thing that Sayyidina Umar said that أغربوا في النكاح, that marry distantly, as in with difference, that it's more stronger for your offspring. Okay, there's another question coming in here. Somebody's saying about all this panic buying, is it haram? I believe it's categorically hoarding. You see, panic buying is just stupid. I suppose being stupid might not be haram, but it's just it's your share of what the IQ that I suppose divinely was given to you for some reason. God must have obviously knew some wisdom.
People talk about lessons from history. People say, oh, there's lessons from history, like history repeats itself, or history this, that, and the other. I'll tell you the number one lesson from history: people are stupid.
Dumb. That's it. People are overrated.
People are stupid. So as you rightly say, hoarding is haram. At this moment, is not only haram because in of itself.
And there is a hadith in Bukhari, by the way, al-ihtikar, hukra is haram.
Yeah, because now it has the double effect that not only are you hoarding, you are preventing others. We must have all seen that heartbreaking picture of the nurse who turned up to the Tesco's after work, in tears that she couldn't buy anything, because some idiots had gone off and bought 30,000 thingies of rolls of bog roll. Look, man, learn to wash your ass with water. Yeah,
exactly.
Your friendly Pakistani or Indian neighbor will show you how. Yeah, we'll give a practical.
No, I mean, but this included the Muslims. The Muslims were doing all this hoard buying as well. It was like crazy. So they decided to stock up on 100 bags of rice, 100 bags of flour.
Yeah. So as I said, what's the rule of history? People are stupid.
Yeah, stupidity, huh? Yeah, salam. Somebody had said, so I hope that answers that question. Somebody had asked, does fasting build up the immune system to better fight off viruses?
There is some evidence to show that fasting has a number of metabolic advantages, immunity being one of them. It's contested. Uh, I I would it kind of makes sense to me physiologically
Yeah.
that it would. But I think it also you'd have to drill into the detail of what they define as fasting. So, for example, we're all aware of the intermittent fasting diet that
Yeah.
a lot of people do. That is not the siyam of the Muslims, is it? That is, that because they you can drink during the entire period. It's just food that you don't have,
Of
you know.
course.
So therefore, you'd have to look at the individual studies and the individual evidence to find out what they have specified fasting to be,
Sure.
and then take look at the results
I,
from there on.
I just want to add, somebody had commented that, look, we've spoken about hoarding, but yet Yusuf alayhi salam commanded the king to kind of hoard for 7 years worth of stock. So this is where you get, you mentioned about the people, but then one or two amongst them get a bit intelligent and they think, well, not only can we have these dumb ideas, we can justify them through the Quran.
Neem Hakim Khatre Jan, Neem Pir Khatre Iman. Right?
Allah, 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 Allah.
All
That is
right.
so true. That is so true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
like,
I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
yeah, because a
Yeah.
half doctor is somebody that would compromise your health, and a half, peer or a scholar is somebody that would ruin your iman. Now, just to be clear, that this thing where there is one thing taking national action, okay, taking or whatever, like obviously back then they weren't nations, but they, in that sense, they were nations. Obviously the Egyptian pharaohic kind of pharaonic state, whatever it was, its empire, a country saying we are going to have a famine next year, or if the UK, I feel, let's say, had proactively, or other countries had proactively thought, okay, there's a virus coming, let's stock up, let's get resources, let's do this, let's deal with all of that. That is not the same as people panic buying and personally stocking up. So you've got two very different things. So where you've got, on one hand, a country saying, let's make sure we've got enough resources to feed our people, that is absolutely intelligent and a must to do. It's not the same as me going to a local supermarket thinking, you know what, I'll just buy out all the bloody sugar and all the milk and all on this shelf, and now my whole neighborhood is going to struggle to get food or to get their essentials because I've decided to get there first and just buy the whole thing out, and thereby creating a kind of panic and a social hoarding culture, because other people are going to think, well, damn, before other people do it, I better jump on it. And I better stock up. And everybody starts thinking like this. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it is not the same. It's nothing to do with how Yusuf alayhi salam advised the king, look, why don't you store up the kind of national storage? Or if any country does that, that's the right thing to do. Okay, this is the dumb thing to do. Okay.
Yeah, I
These
mean,
are total opposites.
yeah. Just because you've read a translation by Abdullah Yusuf Ali doesn't now suddenly give you
Yeah, exactly. And this is a prime example of people.
a degree in Islamic studies.
This is a prime example of why your reading of the Quran is leading to more harm. Yeah, so if there are any other quick questions, I don't want really to be affecting Doc's time. Let's see, today we've had, no, that's still on the hoarding, we've answered that. Felt bad for the nurse. People are absolutely, is it not permissible to hoard at the expense of the Prophet Yusuf? Somebody else asked that as well. Wow. Okay, so there's,
fine. So, as they say, great minds think alike and fools seldom differ.
Right, so people...
I apologize if I'm getting a bit cranky, but
No,
I'm not
no,
normally up at
absolutely.
this
I think, you know what, Doc, it's been awesome. We really went on. I actually thought we're just going to do a quick 1 hour, cover some of these things. But just talking with you, Doc, as always, has been so awesome.
Yes, as
It's
always,
a pleasure.
it is, you know.
And post quarantine, definitely pop round. Yeah, mi casa es su casa. It's
Yes,
and you're always welcome
same
here.
here as well. Same here
And
as
people,
well.
those of you tuning in that have hacked this, shukran, jazakumullah khair for your support and for your comments, encouraging comments. By the way, if anybody does want to reach out to Doc, he is available on Facebook. You are available or not?
And Twitter's probably the best place to
Twitter
get it.
is the best place to hit Doc up, which is Dr. No, it's Majid Sheikh, is it?
Yeah.
Majid Sheikh. That's his handle. Cool, people. Other than that, it's been awesome. Take very good care of yourselves. Please, for the love of God, stay in your homes.
Stay at home and watch telly.
Ghar mein baitho, salo.
Yeah.
Quédate en tu puta casa.
And my last message is get the salams